In 2011, 302,621 child maltreatment reports were made and investigated in Texas alone. According to the 2008 through 2011 report, Child Welfare Outcomes, which was prepared by the Children's Bureau of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. These investigations resulted in 65,740 child maltreatment victims. That's a total of 236,881 cases that were either dismissed or classified as having no merit. That number is the reason why I chose the field of psychology. I have been one of those statistics, and I strive to prevent other children from being that same statistic. So, many of us have been or know someone who has been victim to child abuse, and we know how devastating it can be, but we also know how delicate of an issue it can be to address. I want to share with you some things to consider if and when you're ever faced with having to confront such a situation. We'll talk about the child's perspective, the child's view of the situation, the responsibility of the investigator, and the long-term effects of a case that doesn't get resolved. So let's first consider the perspective of the children. In most cases, the abuser is a parent or a guardian. Children grow up believing that their parent or guardian is someone that they should be able to identify with, someone they should be able to turn to and rely on. Society teaches children what constitutes abuse and how to recognize it. So the children are conflicted with these two ideas in their minds. And because of this conflict, a lot of times the children don't go on to talk about it because they don't want to get their parents in trouble. They remain loyal to the parents, and they keep the abuse to themselves. Sometimes they keep it to themselves because they're convinced that it's their fault. Sometimes they keep it to themselves just simply because they don't want their parents to get into trouble. When the child is afraid to talk about the abuse, it can be hard to prove. Without the child's word, without the child saying, yes, this is what happened, it's hard to prove or disprove any accusations. And so that takes us to the next point, the responsibility of the investigator. The investigator has to be able to recognize signs from the abusers. So one thing that I wanted to point out, the Department of Family and Protective Services website states that one way to determine if there is a likelihood that the child may be abused in the future is by assessing whether or not the family is willing and able to use family and community resources to deal with any safety threats and risk factors in their lives. Whether or not they're willing to cooperate. So when the abuser is confronted with such a situation, most of the time they're going to at least pretend that they're willing to cooperate. Otherwise, would be admitting guilt for them, and they don't want to put themselves in that situation. So with that being said, they say that they're willing to cooperate. The state takes their word for it. Where is the child left? The child is left in the middle of the situation. Investigators have to be able to see beyond that. They have to be able to see beyond the words. They have to be able to recognize when they're being manipulated, when they're being lied to. If the investigator is unable to identify the manipulation, then they may be convinced that there was no warrant for their investigation. And then the case is dropped, no result, the child is left in the same situation that they started with. And so that moves us into my final point. When a child is left in that same situation, when a child does not get a resolution to their case, what can that do to them? That can lead the child to feeling like they can't trust anybody. They can't trust themselves. They can't talk to anybody because nobody is ever going to believe anything they say. So they question things they say. And at some point, they even start to question the validity of their own memory of the things that have happened to them. They start to wonder how accurate their recollections actually are. This carries over into adulthood, into relationships, into social relationships, into interpersonal relationships, into work environments. Every aspect of their life is affected by this. Children are the future of our world. That makes it our responsibility to look out for them, to try and keep this from being the case. So, on that note, we'll come to a close. We've talked about the child's perspective. We've talked about the investigator's responsibility and the long-term effects of a case that goes unresolved. So what I would like for you to consider is how you can contribute to protecting the children of our future. How can you contribute? What can you do in your everyday life? So maybe the next time that you're confronted with a situation, you are able to listen to the child speak, or maybe you become an advocate for a local advocacy center. Perhaps you simply think twice before dismissing the idea or the possibility of abuse in a situation. Whatever actions you decide to take, just know that the children are the ones that benefit from it. The children are also the ones that suffer when we don't take any action. So I refuse to sit by and let these numbers continue to grow, and I hope that you do the same. So join me in the Stand Against Child Abuse.